Hello and welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, I'm Liv and I'm a full-time, almost entirely online yoga teacher, and today I'm going to be talking you through online teacher trainings, my experience and what I thought of it, how they work and whether or not I think they're a good idea. First off, let me point out that this was not the first yoga teacher training I've ever done. I completed my first 200-hour in person in London, and I'll save my experience and opinion of that for another video so as to not stray too far off track. I completed a second 200-hour teacher training this summer during the global lockdown that coronavirus brought upon us all. It was a rocket and vinyasa yoga teacher training with the Yoga With Carson Academy. But this is not so much a review of this specific teacher training, more of an overall opinion of online teacher trainings in general. I will go over a specific review of the course towards the end, so you can check the timestamps that are in the description below if you'd like to skip ahead to that bit. Each yoga school conducts their training very differently, but most commonly you'll find that the course content is divided into essential and non-essential modules, i.e. ones that you must sit through and ones that you could choose to take or not. This is basically providing you the opportunity to dive as deep or as shallow as you would like with certain topics, whilst ensuring that you learn the essentials to cover all bases in becoming a yoga teacher. I personally love this approach, as we all have different backgrounds and reasoning for wanting to become a yoga teacher. If the philosophy and spiritual teachings of yoga are your passion, you can take all the additional optional classes in this area. Or perhaps if anatomy and biomechanics is your thing, you can hunt down all of those modules as well. In an ideal scenario, you could and would take all of them and soak up every ounce of education available to you and make yourself as well-rounded as possible. But realistically, most people have to juggle daily commitments alongside their training, particularly when they're looking to do it online. There's a reason for that. And dedicating 8 hours a day to lectures and classes just might not be manageable. In the teacher training that I took part in, all modules were taught live. This gave the option to ask questions to the teacher as the class went along. Now, I can't vouch whether this is true for all online teacher trainings, but is very much worth inquiring about if you're unsure. Being able to seek clarification on something, a topic that you're uncertain of, is far easier to process there and then before the topic moves on than it is to send an email after class and get a response hours or maybe even days later. All live classes are recorded and available to watch on demand at a time that suits you. And most online teacher trainings follow this same format to make the course accessible to students worldwide, where time zones might prevent them from joining live classes. I'm aware that some courses offer some of their modules as pre-recorded only. So again, something to consider and question what their helpline policy is like. How quickly do they promise to help you if you're confused and you write into them? Online teacher trainings have frequent homework submissions for the school to check that you're understanding the concepts they're teaching and to keep you on track. These can be a combination of written work, live teaching practice via Zoom or Google Meet or a similar platform, and your own recorded video submissions. Obviously, a large part of learning to become a yoga teacher is the ability to teach. And believe me, teaching to a group of people, whether in person or online, feels very different to simply pretending to teach to no one, or even just teaching your other half. So this is a really important part of training, and check in with the school that you're interested in to see how much live teaching practice the course offers. Most schools then have a final, which really you could think of as just the final piece of homework. And it should include demonstrating your ability to teach an entire class, but can also include written work or a test. Fancy word for a quiz. It's worth noting that being an online school, they can't put you in test conditions, you're at home. So clearly Google and textbooks are there for you whenever you need. But my personal opinion is that this is a great idea. There's no need for a yoga teacher to know everything off the top of their head with perfect recall. Being able to say, I'm not sure, I'm gonna look that up and get back to you, is a phrase that, in my opinion, a lot more yoga teachers need to use more often. So the nature of a 200-hour yoga teacher training is it should take 200 hours to complete. That's where the name comes from. Which, to put in perspective, is the same as working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, for 5 weeks in a row. Which sounds like a lot, right? But many of these hours are accounted for through self-practice or self-study. There's no one there on the sidelines stopping and starting a stopwatch every time you knuckle down to do something. And to be honest, my personal opinion is, why 200 hours? Who says that's how long it takes to learn what needs learning and practice what needs practicing? It's going to be different for everybody, so take the title with a pinch of salt. The great thing about an online teacher training is that you can move through content as slow or as quickly as you like or need. Recordings can be paused while you digest a certain piece of information or practice a certain idea a few times through. If you sat through a live class and felt you didn't quite grasp some contents, you can re-watch and fast forward to the points that you need to re-watch again. And this is such a great aspect to online training, which I feel is one of the main benefits over an in-person course. The actual amount of time that you need for your yoga teacher training is something that you would need to consider and judge for yourself. Like I say, it's going to be different for everybody. What background knowledge do you have? In your experience, do you pick up things quickly or take longer to think things through before they really sink in? Dedicating some time each day to your training is likely going to be needed, but the great thing about an online training course is the flexibility you have with that time. If you have very little time on your hands on a Monday, but then you've got an entirely free weekend, you've got yourself the perfect opportunity for catch-up. Okay, so here's where we get into slightly trickier waters. When you take an online teacher training, it's likely that the only observations you're going to have of your own asana practice is via submitting videos of yourself for your tutor to review. People come to teacher trainings at different stages of their practice, and while some people may have been practicing and learning yoga for years and years and have a solid understanding of a huge range of poses and alignment, there's going to be a lot of people who quite simply don't. You should seriously consider your own level of knowledge of yoga before deciding you want to teach it. Remember that yoga teacher trainings are designed to help you become a teacher of yoga, not necessarily teach you how to do yoga. Whilst each individual school will have its modules on teaching alignment and cueing, most base these lectures around correcting alignment mistakes rather than telling you how to do the pose. How advanced your practice is an ambiguous term, as what really defines advanced? When it comes to becoming a yoga teacher, it's not about whether you can do a handstand or the splits or flip your grip in dancer pose. Many people can do these things and have never done a yoga class in their life. They wouldn't have the first clue about the alignment of, say, pyramid pose. But it's more about your knowledge base of the foundations of yoga. So when it comes to deciding whether to take an online yoga teacher training, I would say these are less suitable the more beginner your knowledge base. If you're confident in your cobra and worry-free with your warriors, you'll be absolutely fine. This is the loudest voice that you'll hear in argument against online teacher trainings: the lost human connection, the sense of togetherness and growth of a group of like-minded people, the friendships and bonding that occur, and of course the more physical side of learning adjustments and being adjusted. And there's no yeah but here. The simple fact of the matter is you can't experience these things via an online teacher training. There's often community chat groups in the form of Facebook groups or WhatsApp, Telegram, where you can connect with others on the course, which is a lovely attempt to bridge that gap. But ultimately it's not the same. You don't have a room full of different bodies and abilities to look at and figure out how you might adapt your teaching for that individual. And you don't have a group of like-minded people in one space sharing their thoughts, opinions and ideas, which is another really valuable learning tool. But at the time of producing this video, the world is in the middle of a global pandemic, and in-person trainings aren't actually even an option right now. And even after life returns back to normality, there are many factors that make in-person trainings inaccessible to a huge group of people. Cost is an enormous factor. In-person trainings have a relatively small capacity of students and bigger costs associated with building rental, things like that. So it makes sense that they're more expensive, but to a price point that's entirely unrealistic to many people. Time and flexibility of time is just as difficult. It's a privileged position to be able to take a month away from your everyday life to attend a 200-hour intensive in India, in Bali. It's still a privileged position to be able to attend all weekend, every weekend, for 3 months straight, which is what I did for my first teacher training whilst I worked full-time during the week. So the flexibility of schedule and the ability to learn at your own pace is the biggest deciding factor for many here. Ultimately, my opinion is that if you have the time, money, and lack of global pandemic to take time out to do an in-person teacher training, it is the gold standard for becoming a yoga teacher. But being blessed with these things isn't a reality for many people. And often the weighing up of the scales of cost and time versus affordability and flexibility weighs in the favour of the latter. But these things aren't for me to decide for you. Here are what I would consider the most important questions to ask yourself or ask a yoga school if you're considering an online training with them. What quantity of the modules are compulsory versus optional? Can you see the timetable in advance to understand the commitment that you're going to need? Are the classes and lectures live or pre-recorded? What live teaching experience is available? What is my current knowledge base and confidence of yoga postures and their alignment? What budget and time do I have to dedicate myself to becoming a yoga teacher? So for those interested in the specific training that I did, I took, as I said, the Rocket and Vinyasa training with the Yoga with Carson Academy, which is the most affordable online teacher training out there at the time of recording. Carson is running this with the help of many skilled yoga teachers from all around the world and is basically trying to make teacher training accessible to anyone, no matter their financial position. He's running these trainings at a large cost to himself, which to me, I can't understand the business model, but if budgets are really tight, definitely worth checking out. So as a review, let's start with the positives. The teachers of both the theory modules and the asana practice were amazing. I was really impressed with both the broad range of expertise as well as the ability to share information in an easy to digest manner, which is really important when you're talking about complicated topics. The course content was thorough for all corners of yoga and even covered topics that many other trainings have fallen short with, such as awareness of abuse in yoga, cultural appropriation, nutrition, and lots of information on other movement practices that aren't strictly yoga, but are important topics to be aware of as a yoga and therefore movement teacher. Other positives are the affordability and way more than 200 hours of yoga for you to absorb up if you wish and if you have the time for. So then the negatives. I was the first round of students to take this training and therefore I feel a little bit mean in saying that the organisation was a little poor. I wasn't sure at times what my homework was, as it was often discussed in non-essential classes without anyone being made aware of that. The response and feedback from homework was really slow, although it's worth mentioning that the helpline that you email into if you have any questions and if you're confused about something had very fast response times. Worth noting that as someone in the UK, many of the live classes weren't at a time that I could make. However, all that meant was that I watched the recording, which really wasn't the end of the world, and it was something that I was aware of before I signed up. I've heard from many who have taken this course after me that they've actually managed to iron out their organisation skills and their homework format to let everything run a little more smoothly. And as a last observation, many of the classes were exactly that, classes. And my personal preference would be to have had some more workshop style classes, where there would be discussion of poses and breaking them down to deepen our learning. But maybe that's just me and I already have a 200 hour and this is my first actually for a 300 hour training. Overall, I found it to be a really valuable course. As a teacher who had already done a 200 hour, I found myself learning things I had already learned in my first training, which to be clear is me saying is a very good thing. My first training in London was nearly £4,000, so I would expect it to have been thorough. I think as long as you have a good baseline knowledge of yoga postures, as I mentioned previously, I would definitely recommend it. So I hope all of this info has been helpful if you found yourself on the fence of online training and unsure which side to get off. Remember that this is simply my opinion based on my experience. And you know what they say opinions are like. Everybody has one. I would love to hear your thoughts though on online trainings, whether you're thinking of taking one, whether you have taken one, whether you think they're the worst thing that's ever hit the yoga world, or perhaps you think they're the best. Differing opinions are very welcome in the comments below. If you'd like to try out the class that I submitted as the final for my online teacher training, you can see that class just here.